Hi, everyone. Welcome to VaynerX Marketing for the Now. Welcome to episode number 8. I'm Andrea Sullivan, CMO of VaynerX, and I'm here with Gary Vaynerchuk. Good morning, Gary. Do you got your coffee?
I do not. I'm just going right into it, Andrea. You're
just going to go right. You got that adrenaline going anyway. I have a feeling, Gary. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Today, we're going to circle the globe without getting on a plane. We'll be hearing from C-suite leaders, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs, all world changers. Don't forget to check out past episodes at VaynerX.com, and we're going to keep the conversation going today. Hashtag marketing for the now. So first up, we've got Dean Aragon. Dean is an international marketeer who comes to us live from Switzerland. Dean has held incredible roles at organizations like Shell and Unilever, serving many different brands and living in many, many different countries. Dean is also the proud husband and a father of 5. And Dean, we are so happy to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, and to you guys in Manhattan, and good afternoon here in Europe. Thanks for having me.
Dean, good to see you, my friend. Hope you're well. Before we get into it, big shout out to Jeff Rambo, who is up at 4:38 this morning with a sinus infection, but is now thrilled because he gets to watch Marketing for the Now. So, and everybody else, hashtag Marketing for the Now to keep up with the conversation. So Dean, listen, obviously I'm extremely fond of you. We've interacted quite a bit over the last half decade. I think your origin story, like where you were born as a kid, I think would be really impactful here. We have so many different types of people watching, from C-suite executives to board members to entrepreneurs that, you know, have $1,000 a year business right now. So with a huge gamut of individuals, I actually think your story is quite inspirational to get to the top of the marketing game on a global level. Why don't you tell everybody where you're from, and then maybe take me all the way up to the point where marketing became something that you were about to get into?
Yeah, thanks. And again, thanks for having me, guys. Well, I was born, raised, educated, grew up, fell in love in the Philippines. And I was pretty happy to stay in the Philippines. And, you know, I studied management economics from a top university in the Philippines. My original dream was to be the chief economist of the Philippines. But one day in Career Week, some of the folks from Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and Nestle, you know, passed by our university, and I kind of heard for the first time what brand management and marketing were about. And I said, I think that's more my gig. I think that's more what I want to do. And that happened. And so I joined first companies like JWT at the time, J. Walter Thompson, and I fell in love with, you know, the world of advertising. And eventually I said, well, you know what? I think I can be a client. So I became a client, and I decided to really.
So when you heard from the biggest companies in the world from brand management, the first foray though was into agency life, an iconic creative shop like JWT. Did you go account side, strategy, creative? Where did you go?
That's a great question. In the mid to the late 80s, you still did everything.
Right.
See, you didn't have those hyper specializations that you see today. So I did a bit of account strategy. There was no such thing as a strategic planning fully developed yet at the time. So you couldn't give that to all the clients, only the most special ones. You did a bit of media planning, and sometimes when the clients didn't have any budgets, you were the on-cam talent as well. You know, you're gonna have to do with this, because
that must have been whatever your face was in. I promise you, oversold.
certainly less rounded than it is today.
Dean, as a senior marketer, how do you keep your ear to the ground? I think one of the things that it's always impressed me is in our conversations, whether at Cannes or in a boardroom, there's just a small group that I think of when I think about ear to the ground marketers. Is it reading? Is it podcasts? Is it going to meetings? Is it your own marketers internally? What's allowed you to stay, for lack of a better word, relevant and in tune when very senior marketers tend to, unfortunately, because they're pulled in so many other directions, lose their feel for the trenches?
I think the number one quality for any aspiring marketeer or advertising professional or creative entrepreneur would be curiosity. And I've never stopped being curious. I'm in fact obsessed with looking at, what's making people, really live a full life. What are they passionate about? And I try not to project my own perspectives on things, but I try to look at it through their lens. And I think that's really informed the way I see things, or the way I see things that they see. Because otherwise you tend to impose your own worldview on things. And that's the biggest mistake that I think any advertiser or marketer can have. So always stay curious. And I think it's a little bit of everything, right? Podcasts, I read books.
How do you balance the focus group of one, back to your opinion,
Yeah,
while recognizing that there are some judgment calls you need to make? Like, what is that balance? Because I do hear, I think a lot of people like Gary, you talk a lot about like putting out a lot of content so that the consumer can give you indicators, quant and qual. Seems great, but also seems like you have a lot of your own conviction and you just kind of do stuff. What is the balance? And I actually, before I say anything, how do you think about that?
I think first of all is to assemble, a variety of sources around you. So I talk a lot about the X-Men approach to teams, where you have to be careful to curate the people around you that have very different superpowers, certainly very different to yours. You can't afford a number of clones, otherwise it's a gigantic echo chamber. And at the end of the day, you make a call on the basis of what you have seen, and that's why experience, I've been around for a long time, helps a lot, but also things that are not necessarily your view. I often tell people who work with me, please scare me. Because if I'm not scared, if I'm not uncomfortable, that means you're just reinforcing my worldview and my belief system, and that's dangerous. That's going to be very narrow.
What about distribution of consumption? How do you see the current landscape between podcasting and newspapers and OTT and outdoor television commercials, long form video, TikTok? Back to your earlier answer kind of inspired me to ask this question. Marketing's evolved quite a bit, throughout your career. The fragmentation of attention, obviously, I have so much historical respect for JWT when I think about, a TVC down and you do some matching luggage on outdoor and print and away you go. The fragmentation is extraordinary now. For the aspiring marketers or for the entrepreneurs that don't play in these waters, how big of a challenge has what the internet and technology advancements done to people's attention spans? How big of a challenge has that been? How much of an opportunity has that been? And what is the biggest change? Like, what is kind of the new skill set that every marketing organization needs to compete?
It's a great time to be a marketeer, right? Because of all of that choice, but also an incredible challenge to constantly learn. And often, especially for, people like me who've been around for a long time, I need to constantly empty my cup of things that I think I know and unlearn a few things and learn a few things. Now, having said that, there are a few fundamentals that don't change, such as the value of knowing who you're talking to and really understanding what are the insights at play so that you can respond to the insights. And based on the task that you have to achieve, then you assemble what sort of channels, what sort of content forms and formats do you need to be able to elicit the response you want. What you need to resist is the temptation to kind of play with every widget and sort of every new innovation, because you can have all of these whiz-bang sort of techniques, but if you're not clear on the targeting, on the insights, on the strategic objectives that you need to achieve, then you're just going to get lost in the weeds. And I've seen that happen. And you don't have all the money in the world. So especially for the entrepreneurs, right, you need to be very focused on what do you use the money for and what it will give you the best impact that plays to your business strategy.
Let's go to story time. Give me a story or two of your career where I put out a film a week ago I've gotten an enormous amount of feedback around changing your mind. Mm-hmm. I think, Andre, we've been together a couple of years and even in that time you've seen me, like, I'm comfortable with changing my mind quite a bit. And I've always been fascinated where people think it's a weakness. My father kind of, would get very frustrated with me. He basically thought once you said something out loud, he was very different to me, Dean, a man of not so many words. So once you said something, you stuck to it until the grave. So we used to have a lot of friction in that. I would love to hear your story on this. A meeting, a moment early, one thing I know about you and I that we share a lot of really, I would say energy. So, and the way I think about that then is confidence and conviction. And I've really enjoyed through my career humbling moments, because it's kind of what created balance. That experience created balance for me, because I did have a lot of confidence. Any early stories of being in a boardroom or seeing something play out, or having a marketing campaign that you would have bet the farm on was going to be remarkable? I think stories of changing your mind are powerful. Anything come to mind as I set you up for that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot, but I guess the principle around it is, as much as you have invested yourself in an idea, in an innovation, in an advertising sort of execution, or a new product that you're developing, I think the most important thing is for you to understand is not so much what you think, but what will the intended audience or stakeholder or customer think. And that's when I'm, as much as, and you know me very well, right? I'm super opinionated, and I invest myself fully in everything that I do. But at the same time, I make sure that that's exceeded by my ability to pivot, especially if I hear and see something better. And if you don't have that ability, if you don't have that ability, then you might as well get out of business, because then it's just, as you say, it's a focus group of one.
Yeah.
It suddenly becomes not marketing or advertising or service. It becomes an imposition.
Yeah, it becomes audacity.
How can you impose yourself on people you're supposed to be serving and delighting?
Any story come to mind? Any story where somebody walks, I'm trying to think of those early, I'm always fascinated by mentorship, or something out of left field. A junior copywriter says something. Like, I'm just trying to think of some fun, any fun stories from the early days of your career within the agency.
I mean, when I was a very young brand manager, and I was handling a brand called Ovaltine. I think Americans are familiar with Ovaltine.
Yep.
This sort of chocolate drink, and I was so gung ho about an idea in my mind, and in an agency briefing, I was saying, guys, I think we can do this, we can do that. What do you think? And a very junior sort of creative person at the time at the agency said, we could do that, or we could do this. And of course, he was very clever, because instead of saying, that's just not nonsensical, which my ego might not have been able to take, being such a young sort of
firecracker,
firebrand. But he was very clever in saying, well, we can do version A, which is your version. I'm sure the movie in your mind is very compelling, but maybe it's not just about your movie. What about this movie?
And that struck you?
That struck me because, and again, I had at least the sense to really understand, hey, it's not about me.
Yeah.
It's about them. It's about those who are trying to serve and delight.
Yeah.
And when you lose that at different stages in your career, I'd say that's the beginning of the end.
Yeah. Yeah. In the last couple of minutes, what about during COVID has changed in your consumer behavior from a media consumption or a purchasing consumption? I'm so fascinated that we've been in this state for long enough now that things have absolutely triggered into changing in all of us. Is there some new OTT? Is there a new format? Is there a new app? Or have you bought something that you've never bought before online, and now you're saying to yourself, oh man, when we go back to normal, I'm gonna always buy pancakes online. This is fantastic.
Well, I can start by saying that everything that has to do with doing webcams like this is completely out of stock in Switzerland. So I ordered a webcam April the 1st when I already foresaw it's going to be a protracted sort of marathon, right, rather than a sprint. And so anything that has to do with setups like this is in high demand, and I think it will be in high demand for the future. And I think anything that has anything to do with virtual experiences and engagement, people are becoming more and more comfortable with, because we're going to have to live with this for some time.
Yes.
And so how do you live through it and with it rather than sort of working against it? But I also have started to buy things much more through online, and trust that, and this is the interesting thing. That's when the power of reliable, credible, trustworthy brands that stand for quality and performance kick in, because you don't have a lot of time to really check it out. So I bought something online which I normally would, thoroughly inspect. I grew up in the Philippines, right? I always want to make sure that every cent counts. And so I was surprised at how my ability to trust that the brand, that the product, that the system is not working against me.
I understand.
So, and I think that's a critical enabler.
Dean, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, and have a lovely summer to everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you, Dean. Our next guest is Casa Marte, the CEO and founder of CONBODY, and he's an incredible entrepreneur. Coss began his fitness journey in his prison cell, where he used only the tools that he had around him. And when he got out, he launched CONBODY, a prison-style boot camp that I can tell you firsthand will get you in shape and help you find muscles you never knew that you had. Coss has been featured in over 200 major media outlets, and we're so lucky to have him. Welcome, Coss.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Coss, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I just taught a workout this morning, so I feel good.
You're ready.
Yeah.
Coss, I think, why don't you give some context to the audience? Tell us about feel free, take 5 minutes to establish your incredible story.
Yeah, so CONBODY is a prison-style boot camp, which we hire people coming out of the prison system to teach fitness classes. It was all derived from my prison experience. I was born and raised in the Lower East Side, still live here, probably gonna die here. And I grew up in a neighborhood that it was very, very drug infested in the 80s and 90s. And as a kid, I saw that as an avenue of making money. My mom immigrated from the Dominican Republic when she was 6 months pregnant with me. She ended up working in a factory. She babysat me under her sewing machine, and that's how I lived. And as a kid, I would see other kids, with the Nintendos, Atari, Game Boys, and all that stuff, and that's what I wanted. I wanted other stuff. And every time I asked my mom for something, she was like, "Mijo, I can't afford it." And so that would frustrate me, and I would do anything. I was collecting going door to door in my building, collecting bottles, cans, changing them for nickels in the bodega, opening up the fire hydrant, cleaning cars. But I seen the guys that were on my corner who, wore the chains, had the girls, the cars, and I saw that they were making money. It was crazy how there was heroin lines down the block, people buying drugs off of them. And I saw that as an avenue of becoming rich. I remember in school, a teacher said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "I wanted to be rich." And I saw these guys making money, so I followed the experience. And I started selling drugs at 13, and by the age of 19, I was making over $2 million a year, running one of the largest drug delivery services in New York City. At 23, I was arrested, sentenced to 7 years. And that's when I found out I had all these health issues. My cholesterol levels were through the roof. The doctors and the physicians said in prison that if I didn't start exercising or eating correctly, that I could probably die of a heart attack within 5 years. And
wow, that extreme.
I was 23 years old. They placed me on medication, and I was like, I'm not gonna die. What are you talking about? And I went back to my cell that day and just started thinking about my son. My son's 13 now. And I just started thinking about that. I wanted to come home for him, and I was like, I can't die in this place. And so I went out to the yard and I started running laps. People would call me Fat Forrest Gump, joking around. And
how much did you weigh at the time?
I was 231.
Really?
Came home 160.
Wow. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, I'm always fascinated by mindset. When you got to that level at 19, did you just delusionally believe that you were invincible and that the system would never catch you? Or did you have kind of that underlining anxiety that you just kind of knew at some point the gig was going to be up, but you were so deep, there was just no way to get out?
Both. But I think I was also delusional that I felt legal. I felt like I could do whatever I want. I was not going to get caught. I was not serving. I was not dealing drugs. Everything was being passed over to me. So we changed the way we sold drugs. Back in the day, I grew up and I saw individuals like standing on the corner doing drugs. I made a whole delivery service. I made 10,000 business cards. I went up to every person that I thought used drugs on Wall Street and went up to these fancy bars. I wore a business suit. I had everybody on my team wear a business suit. And then I had a connection where we were renting cars for really cheap, and then everything went down. Yeah, I remember having 7 cell phones because each phone only held 1,500 to 2,500 contact numbers. And so every time I had so those were my clients, and we were actually like literally picking up the phones with two like, hello, where you at? 23rd and 3rd, 14th and 5th.
Wow.
Give me 10 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. There'll be a Toyota Camry on downstairs on the corner of the northwest corner of this blah, blah, blah. And that's how we was operating. So I had a whole dispatch service. I had about 20 cars, 2 shifts. It was just a crazy, crazy time. I thought I was not going to get caught.
Were you stunned when it happened?
I was surprised. I was caught off guard. Yeah, I was caught off guard. I remember the day they caught me. I remember, I don't know if you remember, but you got to remember the Nextels. And so we were operating with Nextels, and we were sending, and we're like telling our drivers like 23rd and 3rd, and I'm sending all my drivers to different spots. And they were, and I don't know if you remember, but it used to get caught and be like, beep, beep, when they used to not work. And I was like, damn, this guy's not picking up, and the customer's waiting on the corner. And my drivers were getting caught one at a time as I was sending them because our phones were being tapped. And so I'm sending the feds with, picking up my drivers one at a time, and it was just one shift, so 10 of us. And then at the end of the day, they came raided the stash house. They caught me coming out of the stash house. I got caught with about 1.5 kilos of coke and money and all this other stuff. But
and the rest is history. What about the next chapter? You have 7. Did you serve all 7 years?
No, I served total 6 years.
And so when did the shift happen in your mind? Because I grew up in some interesting scenarios myself. So several of my friends have spent substantial time in prison, and I'm always fascinated by the mindset. Some people come out doubling down, like just doubling down, like fuck it. And other people really make that shift. When did you make the shift in your process that you're going to come back out and you're going to do it differently? And how did that go down?
Yeah, so towards the end of my incarceration, I was about to be released in this early release program called SHOCK. You probably know about it. It's like ex-Marines turned correctional officers. They beat the crap out of you. You save 3 years to your sentence. So I was about to come home early, and I remember one day the officer calls me down to the bubble and he says, you have to report to the medical unit. So I go to the medical unit. I'm thinking I'm gonna be doing my teeth. I've been waiting on the dental list for like 3 years. Dentists in prison take a long time.
Yep.
So I go down to the medical unit, and this officer places me on the wall, and they do random searches. And so he places me on the wall. He starts searching me, and he starts searching me really aggressively. He puts my hands really low to the wall, and I'm almost like holding a plank. And I shift my body a little bit as he got between my legs because I felt comfortable. And he punched me behind my head, and he said, "Today's not my day. Don't fuck with me." And I dropped down to the ground, and I felt like he knocked me out for a little bit. I saw stars, and I got up and I turned around on officers to avoid another hit. So as soon as I turned around, they pressed the pin. The pin is this button in this walkie-talkie. As soon as that button is pressed, the whole alarm for the whole prison goes off. And they send me into solitary confinement after they beat me up. About a half dozen officers beat me up. They shackled me. They walked me to the box. I was about to be released in 2 months. And because of this incident, I'm now serving my 3 more years in prison.
My gosh.
So I'm devastated. I'm in the box. I'm pacing back and forth. I'm in now 24-hour lockdown. It's about 105 degrees in there. There's no AC. There's no fan. I'm walking naked. And this officer walks by my door, and he passes me in the food slot a paper pen and an envelope. So I quickly grabbed that paper pen and envelope. I started writing a letter to my family telling them I need a lawyer. I need to fight this case. This guy's trying to give me, another case, blah, blah, blah. Then I closed the letter in this envelope, and I realized I had no stamp to send out this letter with. And so I felt hopeless. I felt devastated. I started banging the wall, started banging my head on the wall. And then I got frustrated and laid on my bed. And it was not until like 3-4 days in solitary where my sister finds out that I was in solitary. My sister's like Mother Teresa's child, super religious type of person. She writes me a letter and says, you know, you haven't called home. I called the prison. We found out you're in solitary confinement. We got your back. Everything's going to be okay. All I want you to do is read Psalm 91 from the Bible. And I'm like, Psalm 91? I don't need no religion. I need a lawyer. Like, I'm like, fuck God. And so I take that letter, threw it in the corner of my cell, laid back there. But the only thing I had in my cell was this Bible that she gave me on early on my incarceration. So the only thing that follows you through your whole incarceration is a religious item. Now, I'm still not a super religious person, but I do believe in a higher power. And out of boredom, I decided to open up to Psalm 91, which states, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my shelter, my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. As soon as I read those words, the stamp fell out of my Bible in between my pages. And that was the stamp that I needed to send out this message to my family to let them know about the whole story of what happened to me.
Wow.
And at that point, chills ran down my body. I felt like there was something bigger than myself. And I prayed, you know, not to go back to the streets. I said, I need to find a different avenue. And at this time, I already was training. I already lost weight. Fitness was my passion. And I said, God, I want to start a fitness company. So there's where CONBODY was all derived. Yeah.
Who was your first client?
My first paying client, my first client was my mom. She, so I came home, I was living on her couch. She was renting her couch for about $200 a month. And, but my first real paying client was his CEO of, I think it was Grill, New York. He was a real estate agent, but he was a super wealthy guy, was running around the block. And I remember having a broken piece of pipe on Forsyth. I don't know if you know the Lower East Side like that. On Forsyth in Rivington, there's a soccer field. So I stuck a pipe and I'm doing pull-up training there. I got my mom, I got my aunt, I got another neighbor there. So I'm just going after anybody I know from the neighborhood trying to get them to train. And this guy just runs up and tries to do a pull-up. And I'm like, yo, that's my pull-up bar. Like, you got to pay me for that. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. How much do I owe you? And I was, how much do you charge? I was like, I was not even charging at that point. I had no idea what I was going to be charged. And I was like, 200. He was like, $200 for semi-private training? I was like, yeah. And so he was like, can I join the class? So we joined the class. Right after I walked down to the ATM, I was like, yo, boom. I had no contract. I was running the business with an iPhone 4. I had no idea how to use Twitter, Instagram.
But you missed all that
whole time lapse. Yeah, I went from a flip phone to a touchscreen phone, and it was just a whole different world. It's just Flintstones meeting the Jetsons for me.
And it just went, I mean, it basically, the skill set that built the first business is the skill set that builds the second business.
I did the same guerrilla marketing tactics. I made 10,000 business cards, flyers, postcards. I went to the B train, D train, F train, started sticking them in the little slots. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Casa Marte. I started CONBODY fitness program where I hired formerly incarcerated people to teach fitness classes. I told my story in like 10 seconds and just kept doing that and even I was taking Uber pools on purpose, Lyft share rides on purpose, because that'll give me an opportunity to get people right in front of me, and I'm just pitching and be like, oh, you look like you work out, you know, and then to start the conversation there. But a lot of females wearing yoga pants too, so
yes,
that was my target market.
Understood. So what's with the business now?
Yeah, today we've trained over 50,000 people. We've hired over 40 individuals coming out of the prison system, have a 0 recidivism rate. Right now, due to COVID, it's been a blessing for us. We quickly pivoted doing digital stuff. We're doing on-demand $9 a month workout videos, 10 to 20-minute workout videos. That grew up to 50% during COVID. And then we've been doing like live stream Zoom classes. So Amy took a class. She was out there in the park while Andrea's doing the virtual stuff in the Zoom. So we're just connecting the computer, having people in front of us in the park now 6 feet apart. So it's been more of a blessing, man. Do you feel the fact that the environment you grew up in
made you mentally conducive to shifting and adjusting immediately when shit hit the fan?
I think absolutely. I mean, I was the first fitness studio that pivoted right away. A lot of people calling me, they were like, "Oh, you heard Andrew Cuomo, he said shut down all gyms." I'm like, I have 10 people working out in the studio. I'm like, well, he said 50% yesterday, now we got to shut down. I turned on my computer right away, sent people a Google video link, and then we just switched over to Zoom because it's just more compatible. But it was something that just clicked right in front of me. I don't know what happened, but I guess
what happened is when you're trained by the streets, adversity and no is as common as success. When you're trained in the classroom, it's a little bit scarier.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
Yeah. Yep.
Listen, we're gonna have to have you back on again because there's so much more to dig into here, Coss. I really appreciate you, man. Keep pushing.
No, thank you, Gary, and I hope to see you work out with me soon.
Andrea's pushing me hard, so I know I'll have to deliver at some point. We'll talk soon.
We're definitely going to make that happen, Coss. Definitely going to make that happen. Thank you so much. So next up, we've got David Yeung. He's the founder and CEO of the Green Monday Group. It's a social venture with the mission to take on some of the world's most pressing crises around climate change, food insecurity, and public health. David will tell you how he engages and empowers millions of people, along with public and private sectors, towards green awareness, action, and economy. He earned many awards, including Social Entrepreneur of the Year by the World Economic Forum and the Schwab Foundation. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
David, it's a real pleasure. Hope you're well.
Yes, have been looking forward to this. Very excited.
So David, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you actually do?
Right, so we're based in Hong Kong, but with footprints and impact across Asia and the world. I started this back in 2012, 8 years ago, before too many people were at that time, not too many people at that time were talking about plant-based food revolution and, what's wrong with the livestock industry and why we have to change. But with all the science have been pointing to the same conclusion, which is with 8 billion population today and very soon 10 billion, our food system is bound to collapse. Our meat system is bound to collapse. Now, of course, little did we know that 8 years later today, really, it is completely failing us and is creating public health crisis, including, of course, the pandemic right now, climate change. Clearly, we are really on the verge of a global disaster, point of no return. So our organization is multi-pronged. We have our food tech innovation that create plant-based meat analog. We focus on pork because in Asia, pork is the most consumed meat. Yes. So vegan plant-based pork, the brand is called OmniPork, is one dimension of our business, which is on the food tech innovation. We have another dimension, which is Green Common, and that is our restaurant, shop, and distribution network of all the major future plant-based food brands. We have the movement of Green Monday, which is to advocate everyone to go plant-based at least one day a week, and use that as a way to create the community and the alignment among a lot of people, not just individuals or families, but really across people globally. And then we also have a venture capital impact arm that focus on investing in impact business that share the same mission. So altogether, that's the Green Monday Group.
Back a little bit further, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are watching. What kind of kid were you? Were you a great student? Were you entrepreneurial? Like, how did you, just a little bit more of the origin story.
Sure. I am from a business family. I'm from an entrepreneur family. My dad, my uncles, everyone was entrepreneur. They built their business from nothing in different sectors, not in food. They were in apparel, in real estate, etc. But I guess it's the problem-solving mindset of entrepreneurs that when you see problems, we see opportunities, and we see that, how can we address that? In the case of sustainability and climate, I mean, of course, I think today more and more people know the urgency. But the connection I made in the very early days is that sustainability must come with innovation. And innovation in terms of behavior change and solutions to empower people to change. So yeah, that's kind of the quick background. And well, personally, I lived in New York. I lived in New York for over 10 years. I went to Columbia, engineering major. So that problem solving and science mindset
First
is
engineering.
kind of a huge part of that background.
Green Monday, I think, is a super interesting, you know, kind of, I think of your business in almost like a chair, different stool, you know, different legs to build up the whole environment. The Green Monday part, I think, is quite fascinating because I think for-profit, non-profit, like, I think a lot of people miss that leg of the stool where you're doing something bigger. It's a halo of top of the funnel awareness, which has trickle down economics to everything else you're doing. Do you agree with that observation? Is that why you did it? Have you felt that? Is that hypothesis right?
That is very true. The thesis of social entrepreneurship is that, you know, nonprofit and for-profit, social and business do not need to be mutually exclusive. In fact, they work very well together. There's nothing wrong to have a business that is mission-driven and is aimed to solve social, environmental, humanity problems. The beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is always, you know, that innovation spirit, that problem-solving mindset, and you know, combine that with the do-good mentality. I think that really, in fact, I think that's the future of business. You know, it doesn't need to be just, okay, you make money on one end and then you donate money after you become successful. I mean, the business itself can be a major vehicle to drive change.
You know, I was very, very, very involved early on in kind of a community that sprung out early Tom shoes.
Yes.
And then that's what led me to being on the board of Pencils of Promise and Charity Water. Were those things that hit your radar? Were those things that inspired you or created nuances that you wanted to replicate?
Very much so. I mean, I think when it comes to social venture, Tom Shoes is always one of the role model case. And for us, if we just create products, if we just focus on the food tech element, when I think there's still a major piece that is missing, and that is, first of all, people need to know why they need to switch. What's wrong with the food system? You know, why, you know, human beings have been eating meat all in the entire history. So why all of a sudden now we're in 21st century and eating meat all of a sudden becomes not such a good thing? Now, the other argument, which is also very important, is it doesn't need to be a binary. You have to switch from a meat eater to become a vegan tomorrow. So for us to create the movement of Green Monday, first of all, obviously there's a huge advocacy and education element. And on the other hand is to create the narrative that can be inclusive. So whether people choose Monday, Friday, Sunday, but a platform that everyone can join.
It's a gateway, right? It's a stepping stone because, you know, with politics, with conversations like this, everything is so binary that we're not giving people little steps.
That's totally true. We believe in the power of baby steps. You know, so I tell everyone within my organization and outside that we're not here just to sell a food product. We're not here just to, you know, present products or services. We are here to sell change. But change is intimidating. Change is difficult.
And takes a long time. Speaking about a long time, I've been impressed with how you've rolled out globally. Let's talk about that a little bit. What are the learnings and how do you think about that?
Well, first of all, we start here in Hong Kong and the impact has been enormous. We're talking about now 34% of Hong Kong people are flexitarian, meaning they are meat reducers. Again, doesn't mean everyone is a vegan, but they are becoming active meat reducers. So that's number one. But once we get the movement and the initiative into companies, into organizations, whether that is Google, Facebook, HSBC, SANS, Hong Kong University. Once you get into a community or a company, then that can scale, right? I mean, most of these MNCs, of course, they have offices around the world. So then we say, why don't you also implement Green Monday in your Shanghai office, Taipei office, Singapore office, and then New York, LA, London, etc. So it becomes a super scalable, super viral movement, and they can implement this within their cafeteria or whatever environment they're in. So doesn't matter if we're in the context of a family, a corporate, a school, or simply an individual. Everyone can join. And of course, with the power of social media, it just speeds up that viralness.
David, you have such an interesting mission to change people's behavior while building awareness for the brand, and then having the, that's an interesting challenge. Actually, I have a little bit of a left field question. One thing I've been spending a lot of time thinking about is how challenging a society is when everything becomes politicized. Literally everything.
It's challenging.
I would argue, and I'm not educated on this, but I live in the world and I pay attention to the conversation about meat and veganism and all that stuff. Do you feel like people are, there's so much progress when I hear about that number in Hong Kong? Obviously, I'm pretty worldly with my travels and my social listening, so I see this movement gaining momentum. Do you, as somebody who's on a mission, do you worry that it goes from more of like a scientific, conversational, just theoretical, like a real food conversation, world conversation, environmental conversation? Do you fear that it becomes politicized where people just decide they don't want to do it because it's now on this side of the equation and they blindly are on that side of the equation? Is that an overall concern?
Well, there are always going to be deniers. There are always going to be naysayers. I think that applies to anything, anything we do. I think the ironic part is that, anyone, look out, it's July right now and weather is just chaos. Is at the last 12 months were the hottest 12 months ever, okay, in the history of the planet. And then obviously we still have the pandemic going on. And then when it comes to animals, African swine fever has been devastating the hog industry in China and many other countries as well. I mean, these are just hard facts that cannot be denied. So, I mean, for us, on one hand is to create the inclusive movement. We are not trying to shame anyone. We're not trying to demonize any company.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about, and you used it, shame. I think, we live in a world where a lot of people have become resellers of fear and resellers of shame. And I really am taken aback by you bringing up that word, because it's been very much the #1 thing on my mind the last month, that word. I'm excited to hear you say that. Have you noticed how that approach really creates a very quick close down conversation and kind of like,
absolutely.
And in your space, I mean, I have so many friends, on the coast that do, when it comes to this food conversation, environment conversation, do go into shame land, and I find it very ineffective. And I'm very much on board with them, and I'm trying to, conversate with them about like, hey, there might be a different tone, because humans by nature shut down when that hits them.
That's the reason why the narrative is so important. I mean, not to antagonize, not to attack, but rather let's create the new food paradigm that is truly better, healthier, more sustainable for everyone, and create food that tastes as good, if not better. Now, at the end of the day,
by the way, on the record,
because of enjoyment.
By the way, on the record, because I don't want to use I don't know which one it was, so I don't want to get this wrong. But on the record, I actually prefer a meat substitute product on the meat side because of just the texture. What's funny is I think a lot of people say no before they try. And And I think that
Yes.
I think that there is a large majority of people out there whose palates, you know, I grew up in the wine business, so I'm very in tune with palate. I was taken aback of like, oh, okay, there's some things that I don't like as much in this product as, let's say, the meat version. But ultimately what I realized is, wow, I like it slightly better because of the texture. And I was fascinated by it. I wish more people experiment. You know, I used to do it around oysters and sea urchins because I was a very exotic eater, and a lot of my friends just said no, and I would ask them, have you ever had it? And they go, no, but I know I won't like it. And that would always break my heart. But I think that's a very important point, David. I think everybody needs to have at least a couple at bats with these alternatives, because they may be stunned that they forget about everything else. You just might think it's more delicious.
We recently launched our vegan spam. It's called Omnipot Luncheon. It's vegan spam. And everyone who tastes it is blown away. And this is actually a guilt-free version, you know, that you don't have to worry about it being carcinogenic or unhealthy or all of that. So once you take that into account, plus the fact that they taste great, I mean, actually people are very eager to move to the new paradigm.
David, thank you so much for your time. Continue the push. We wish you well.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And before Andrea introduces the next guest, I see a ton of activity on Twitter. If you're just joining, hashtag marketing for the now. We'd love to see you quote the listeners. I see a lot of you taking screenshots. I'm retweeting. So if nothing else, if you want to pick up 100 free followers on Twitter, join us in the conversation. I'm really looking forward to this next guest. Andrea?
Thanks, David. We just converted to celebrating Green Monday, but we haven't tried the vegan spam, so I guess that's up next. So happy to have Elizabeth Windram, VP of Marketing from JetBlue, join us next. Elizabeth has been working for this iconic brand for almost 5 years and leading the teams. And she's also worked on other great brands such as Barefoot Wine and Bubbly. We're so excited to have you today, Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Hi, Gary.
Hey, Elizabeth, it's so great to see you. How have you been?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm well. So, you know, tell us about your story. I mean, I think, you know, obviously the airline industry has been affected. You know, last night I was with a friend. He's like, how's business? I'm like, you know, starting to put the pieces together. You know, and it was painful. We had to do layoffs. We had to do a lot of different things. And he's very heavily in the restaurant business. And I said, and I kind of like talking and I'm kind of being empathetic and I see his face. I'm like, look, on the flip side, if I owned 50 restaurants or an airline or a hotel, as great as an entrepreneur as I am, an operator I think I am, there's nothing you can do in this pandemic. Yeah. No matter how amazing you and your executive team are, this is obviously an extremely challenging time. How have you guys and gals thought about it? And where did your mind go early on, or maybe not even early on, maybe a week or 2 or 4 into it when you're like, wait a minute. Because I mean, listen, on the record, when this all went down, I said, okay, I'll be home for 2 weeks. Yeah. I remember, because I'm always in worst case scenario planning. I'm like, I mean, if it's a catastrophe, we'll be back by the 4th of July. And to me, that was like code red, like everything went wrong. I kind of thought America's a little soft and entitled and wouldn't do the right things. But to me, that meant 4th of July. So I'm just curious when it kind of struck you of like, okay, this is actually a real issue.
Yeah, I think it happened like that for a lot of people. It unfolded day by day, and we became more aware of what was happening and what it was actually going to be. For me, so my daughter's here in public school, first grade, and school's closed, and that sort of said, oh. But the date for reopening was April 20th, and my daughter's birthday is April 19th. So I was like, okay, birthday, and then schools are reopening, and it sort of, you know, day by day unfolded that wasn't actually what was going to happen.
No.
And we all sort of made our peace with it. I'm pretty optimistic. I'm not worst case scenario. So I was like, no, like we're gonna, you know, it's all gonna come together. But I think that really served me. From a business perspective, look, I think we did what everyone did. We took every decision as we needed to take it to do the best by our business and our customers, and most prominently our crew members here at JetBlue. We take care of our people. So, you know, we shrunk down. We were flying for essential purposes. We did continue to fly We continued to, do the best we could while ramping down our service. I mean, JetBlue, we're known for great service, great experience, the whole, right, the JetBlue promise, differentiating from other airlines. And we stripped that down, and it was still there. It was just there in a different form. It's there in the form of the humanity of our crew members and taking care of people who did need to fly. We knew, especially back in March and April, you were on a plane, you needed to be going somewhere. It was important, and we needed to take good care of you.
What's the vibe right now in the airline industry? Like, what's everyone kind of talking about, thinking about? What are you thinking?
So we're hopeful. We're hopeful. Look, this whole pandemic has been very interesting because we are in the be there business. We're in the personal connection business. So if you're flying to see family, if you're seeing friends, if you're flying to see the Grand Canyon with your own eyes, not just see a picture of it, you're there for a business meeting, you're there to close a deal or meet a partner in person and break bread with them and show them that they were worth traveling cross country to meet, right? And when that's all stripped away, we're sort of faced with an existential crisis of, wait, we're in the be there business and now we can't be there. But I think what we've all learned is that we've been faking it for a long time, right? We've all had our devices and our Zooms and our, I have a family Zoom every Saturday night and I see my cousins have wine and it's fun, right? And we've been on these sort of virtual school, virtual journeys, virtual travel. I see it all, but nothing beats the real thing, right? I mean, it's classic marketing line. But I think that's what gives me a lot of hope about my industry, that what we do cannot be replaced even with all of this wonderful technology, which is great, but it hasn't really replaced it. And so I believe that people will get back on planes. I think they're hungry to see their friends and family, especially. That's what we're seeing come back, that sort of friends and family. Like, I haven't seen my grandma. She lives in the Dominican Republic. I'm going to figure out how to get there safely. And so that's starting to come back. And I do think eventually leisure and business travel will come back too. We're seeing it in pockets. People are hungry for it. There's definitely a segment of people who are ready as soon as they believe it's safe. And my job is to communicate what I am doing to safely travel.
Speaking of that, I've been really impressed with JetBlue's ability to stay on, fun, humor. I don't know how you position it. I'm consuming it as a consumer.
Yeah.
It's always had a really light, I smile when I see JetBlue.
Good.
I really do. I really do.
Good, thank you.
As an end consumer, I feel good. And I've noticed serendipitously that it seems like there's a little humor and fun and light still, even during this time. Mm-hmm. A, is that right? Or am I just seeing an old piece of content retweeted? And B, how do you think about that?
No, I think about that all the time. So at the core of this brand is joy. It's joy, it's humanity and joy. And I mean, I don't let lines of copy get past me unless there's a really strong pun in there. So, at the very beginning of things, March, April, we had pared down. People needed straightforward communication. Was it, if they were flying with us, what could they expect? We needed to just really hit home our safety messages and be very clear about that. But we never lose the tone. So you're right, we're bringing our puns back in. We did a BOGO sale for our vacations product this week, and it wasn't just a sale, it was let's BOGO somewhere, right? It's always that. Because why not? Why not? That's the brand, and I wouldn't want to ever lose that. It's part of our DNA. So even in a pandemic, we have to inspire humanity. Even in a pandemic, we need to bring joy and throw in a pun where appropriate, right?
Talk to me about prepping for this a little bit. I saw the 100,000 ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a little, prepping for this. Let's remind everybody I'm a DNF student, so I'm glad I even got that number right. So, there was a pretty strong initiative around first responders.
Mm-hmm. So at JetBlue, our mission is to inspire humanity, and that's real. That's very real for us. That's how we try to behave every day in little ways and in big ways. And during this period when our business was was challenged. Our people were challenged. It was pretty incredible that our team came together and said, how can we help? We always help. And in this moment, it really felt like we needed the help. Our business was struggling. People weren't flying, and yet somehow our team rallied and said, we can still help. There's always more. There's always a way to give with what you have. And when we looked for that, it was there. And the answer this time was that we decided to support our healthcare heroes here in New York City. We're New York's hometown airline. So we wanted to do something here. It was behind me, you can't see, I have a poster.
I love that.
Born and raised in Queens, New York's hometown airline, raised in Queens. I'm also born and raised in Queens, so it's my favorite.
I love that.
Have it.
I wasn't born in Queens, but it was the first place I landed when I immigrated to America. So Queens is always very real to me as well.
That's awesome. That's what. Well,
and the first home of the New York Jets. So that alone puts it at the tippy top. So
right. Well, I'm the official airline of the New York Jets, so we have a lot to talk about.
A lot in common. Elizabeth, actually, on that note, just segue, because I think this will really help a lot of people. For the last 5 minutes, back to a different constituent that's watching right now. What kind of girl were you growing up in Queens? Were you a good student, entrepreneurial, wanted to get into business, thought about other things? How did your journey, your origin story go?
Yeah, so I was a good student. I loved school. I loved learning. I was always interested in business. My first job was actually, though, an investment banker. At college, I did a double major. I did drama and economics.
Fascinating.
Right. And then it was 2001, and I needed to get a real job. Drama wasn't going to help me go back to the city and
that's right.
pay the rent. So I became a banker. I don't know why I do air quotes. It was real. I was. And I did that.
You know what's funny? That was an extremely common course for men and women. For the real youngsters in here, the rest of us probably remember it very easily. But for the real youngsters, that was just very common. Even now, kids. So much of my content is like, hey, kids, high risk in your 20s, but kids still today, 20 years later, want to grow up at 22, 23, and don't take the high risk pattern. And to your point, even though you love drama, it seemed impractical to follow your dream of acting. And so, that makes a ton of sense to me that you did that. Thousands that did.
Well, I was never going to be an actor or maybe a producer, but certainly it felt high risk. So I went into banking, I went into finance. I loved my time in finance. Actually, no one can ever take that away from me.
You learned.
It's great, right? I have a skill set there, like a secret trick that some marketers should cultivate. It's really handy when you need to fight for your budget and show an ROI and go head to head with the CFO on something you really want to do because it's right. You can speak that language. But and then I pivoted after business school. I finally discovered that marketing was what I was looking for. I love to tell stories. I love to connect with people. I care about consumer insight.
It's drama. It's drama and finance.
It's drama.
It's producing. And business.
It's all of the things. So I was finally, it took me a long time to merge my creative and my more practical mathy interests. And I'm glad that I finally did. I wish I'd figured it out sooner, but sometimes it takes what it takes.
P.S. You found it out plenty early. I'm obsessed with people's relationship with time. When did you get into marketing?
About 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So plenty early.
Yeah, it was plenty of time. So I'm obsessed with it too. I turned 40 during the pandemic, which was like, interesting times to have a lot of time to contemplate that.
Yes. I think that one of the most important conversations we can have in society is humans' relationship with time. When 40-year-olds recognize that they're not even at halftime, then optimism and patience kick in, and optimism and patience leads to far better behavior than cynicism and insecurities and lack of patience. And so it's something I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how to market. Anyway, Elizabeth, you were fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. See you on a flight soon.
Can't wait. Before we go to the next guest, I see a lot of people sharing the comments. # marketing for the now. We've seen a big influx of people just joining. I guess it's that 9 o'clock hour. And so thank you for joining us. We're halfway home, just like many 50-year-olds are. And I will now pass it back to Andrea to introduce our next incredible guest.
Thanks, Gary. Our next guest is the amazing Katrina McGhee. She's EVP and Chief Brand Officer of the American Heart Association. Katrina just began her role in February as a boomerang, and she's responsible for promoting the AHA's mission across the US and around the world. Katrina previously was the EVP and CMO for Susan G. Komen for The Cure, and she's also a best-selling author, most recently publishing Be Bold, Be Brilliant, Be You. We're so excited to hear from you, Katrina. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Katrina. It seems like you might have taken a JetBlue flight to somewhere very nice. I see you've got a tremendous setting there. I'm hoping that's not a background. I'm hoping you're actually on that beach.
I am waiting until it's not a background, but until then, I just add a little zen to every meeting I'm in.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here. Did I hear that correctly? I missed that. You just started this role in February?
Yeah.
All right. So let's, always trying to bring as much value for different audiences. There's obviously a subset watching right now that did start their role, let's call it this year. And especially if you started in February or March, you get thrown in. What's been the challenge and what's been the good thing, especially now that you're into your career a little bit, you have context of actually starting a new role in this pandemic? What's been the biggest challenge and what's been the biggest surprise of of maybe a benefit that you would have never imagined if I said to you as a genie, hey, you're going to start this new role and then you're going to be not interacting physically with any of your teammates for 6 months, a year. What's stood out so far?
Well, the fun thing has been I've gotten to know a lot more people quicker. The pandemic forced us all to the table to work together much more rapidly than, the normal onboarding where you meet a person, you come back, you meet another person, and they put you on this schedule. No, the pandemic said we're all in this together. And so I got to meet a lot of incredibly smart, talented people. I've gotten to source talent from unexpected places because all ideas have been important. And it's been a really wonderful, highly creative time. The challenge is I've only been here for 6 months. And so the context with which you would normally make decisions during a crisis, in some cases has been absent. And so I've really had to be present, to listen, to depend on the expertise that's already on the team and try to discern the best path, even with limited context.
Talk to me, thank you. Talk to me about your incredible career. I just want to set the tone and then we can go into some more specific questions just to give the audience some context.
Yeah, you know what? I've just been having fun my whole life.
Good answer.
It's great. I graduated from college and started out in oil and gas. It wasn't my jam, so I went back to school and said I want to do marketing instead. Did sports marketing for a little while, got to work with Emma Smith. That was super fun. Then I went and started my first consulting company because, why not? I was in my early 20s and I wanted to try some new things.
So real quick, because this is important to me. You're in your early 20s. You have this incredible experience with one of the all-time greats, and I'm a big fan of it. And you did have the entrepreneurial spirit. You said that, hey, let me try something on my own.
Yeah, I've always had a side hustle. Listen, Gary, my first job was at 14 years old. I was a tour guide at a historical park, and I was supposed to be watching buildings. Like, they put me in there to monitor so the kids didn't tear up. But I started making up stories because I was bored out of my mind. So the old guy comes around, and he's like, you know what? If you want to tell stories, learn the right stories, and you're going to be a tour guide.
I love that.
Just doing what I love. And that's what I've done my whole life. So I start my own business. Then I'm like, I need to learn a few more things. So I go back in, go to an agency, trial by fire. Then I find the American Heart Association. And that's where, I kind of lit up from the inside out. Because I was like, working toward a cause is my jam. Like, this is the thing.
This feels better. Like, getting people educated so they don't die for your soul felt better than selling a cookie or some scissors or whatever it might be.
Exactly. It was my thing. I lit up from the inside out. And so over the next 2 decades, I went in and out of that. I would stay someplace 6 years and then I would come out and I would start an online retail business, have a consulting company, and I'd go back in and then I'd come out. And so for me, it's always been most important to listen to the whispers of the spirit. I know now that I am at a place to transform, to elevate, to upgrade, to shake things up. And then I depart and I start my own thing and I try something else. But it's fun. You know, it is, to me, it's most important to be present where I'm supposed to be in that moment and see it all as a journey.
Fuck, I love your energy. I'm fired up. Talk to me about, so I started my company a decade ago with the idea of building a platform that would reinvent nostalgia. So I can't wait to my next business chapter where I buy historic brands that are maybe not a big deal right now and I reboot them. I'm just genuinely excited about that. You know, what about for you? I mean, you're getting to refurbish and guide now in your new role, 100-year-old brand.
Yeah.
Exciting for you? Like, how do you think about that? What's the strategy of doing something like that?
I mean, anybody that really calls themselves a marketer or communicator should be jumping up and down for that kind of opportunity, especially when you have a brand that is so rooted in credible health information, trusted among the American people, have walked through so many important milestones in our history, now international. It just, I mean, we'll be 100 in 4 years. And I keep thinking about, like, what is that pivot when we get to that moment? How do we, first and foremost, how do we walk people through this pandemic? How are we really present for people and building mental resilience and walking with patients that are trying to manage chronic conditions while trying to avoid COVID, trying to do all the things that we need to do for the people we serve, and yet create this energy and momentum that walks us up to this place where we can say, golly, we've been here for like a century, and here's what's next. I'm excited. Like, I'm on fire for it.
How are you thinking about it practically? Like, where do you think this organization needs to communicate from a distribution standpoint? Like, where do you feel the brand, the message needs to think about more? Physical events, virtual events, Twitter, television, original programming, podcasts. How are you thinking about the distribution landscape?
Yeah. So, you know, I have a mantra for this year: digital first, equity always, unified voice. That we get more to the point where we create native digital experiences, not just content. I mean, we've been great at pushing content. We have amazing content. You want to know how to manage your blood pressure? It's there. If you want to know how to lose weight, it's there. All of that is there. But I want to create experiences so that community is not defined by zip code, but by interests, beliefs, and desires. Because I think that's where the opportunity for us is. No nonprofit worth their salt should be trying to figure out how to have in-person events. I mean, you know, that's the bread and butter of what has carried the industry through from a fundraising perspective. But we have to reimagine that whole approach and look at what are people willing to support right now? How can I be a solution in their life that inspires them to be a hero in our story and a hero in their own story? Those are the kind of challenges I'm looking at now. We have beautiful new shows that have been launched on YouTube and Facebook. One called House Calls that brings real doctors and real talk. We take real-time questions from people so we can be of the now. And I love that experience, because there's nothing like hearing from the people you serve in real time. They'll tell you what's important. They'll tell you what you want to do and really inform where you should go next.
I'm enjoying this so much. Katrina, first of all, we have to Andre, I need to hang out with this woman, so can you please work on that in real life? Katrina, what's the biggest thing you've learned personally in like, what's the newest addition to your incredible tool belt from a practical standpoint? One of the things I know, we have a lot of people watching this that are CMOs and CEOs of Fortune 5,000 companies. And what, I'm hearing from a lot of them that are watching because they now, at first they viewed me as crazy. Now they're starting to understand there's a little bit of something there. Just really genuinely curious, biggest insight or learning you've had in the last 5 years within digital, AKA, oh, this is a good way to do podcast advertising, or, oh my God, the new OTT ads that I can be running on Hulu. A very specific or platform oriented, or I'm fascinated about TikTok. We can get these teenage girls to help their grandmas. Like, Anything hit you, when I say to you last 2-3 years, something that's really been added to your tool belt as a marketer, anything stand out practically?
I can tell you what I have discovered from the last 6 months.
Okay,
which is that one approach is not enough, and everything has to be interconnected. And I know that sounds very strange, but most of us have operated in the digital landscape as an add-on. You know, we depend on a portfolio mix from a marketing perspective that are in-person, hybrid events, experiential marketing that lets you see, feel, and touch. To replicate that same approach in the minds of consumers, we have to be in more places in bite-sized nuggets, moving them along a journey. And that's what I'm really trying to master. My desire in this season is to be a master storyteller that allows you to see yourself in the story as the hero, that joins the conversation already happening in your head where you are. And so perhaps you are watching Hulu and there is something that appears there that is then reinforced on social that allows you to have a hybrid experience when you go to the grocery store, when you order online. I mean, it has to be a full 360 in a digital format in a way that we weren't operating before, because this is not add-on. This is, you know, I tell people, quit waiting for normal, create your next. Quit waiting for normal, create your next, because this is it. Like, you know, something happened to me in July, Gary. March, April, May, June, I was fine. I'm like, oh, by the summertime, in my mind, like in my head, we were going to start to be on the decline. And then you get to July and you're like,
wait a minute. Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, excuse me, but like, this is it. I had two choices to make. I can create my next, or I can continue to wallow and languish and just exist without really living. And I said, no, I have to do better. We got to create our next.
What about your next as a human? In this last 120 days, what have you noticed has changed for you, either in media consumption or purchase consumption? I'm spending a lot of time on this. I've already asked 1 or 2 other guests this today, and I ask almost everybody I interact with daily. What have you started buying online that is now delivered to your home that you're like, wait a minute, when we go back to normal, I'm always gonna buy strawberries online. This is a great experience. Or what have you picked up on consumption-wise? Maybe because of your commute, you never listened to podcasts, but now you have it running in the background. Or you've bought Disney Plus and you're like, this is fantastic. From a media consumption, or maybe you started reading books, or maybe something out like, or double down or declined. If I asked you most interesting observation about Katrina the woman in purchase behavior and media consumption during this absolute consumer shift of being home, what stands out? What are the 2 biggest changes?
Well, number one, I cultivate selective ignorance. I mean, like literally, I try to do that all the time, but now I'm super intentional about it. I've gone back to old school reading actual books, like the kind I hold in my hand. I don't even want the tablet. I order a book from Amazon and I read it because I need to feed myself the positive. You know, my favorite quote is, I dwell in possibility. So in order for possibility to flourish and my creativity to just explode, I got to get to the quiet and away from the noise of what's happening.
I'm going to interrupt you right now for a plug. I'm seeing the insane love that you're getting on Twitter. You know that you're a very lovable character. There's a lot of people discovering you now. In that sentence, you yourself have a book, and I want to explode your Amazon sales right now. So what's your book, real quick, before I ask you about purchasing? Excuse me, media consumption.
Be bold, be brilliant, be you. It is the C-suite guide to accelerating your career. I took all the crap out, wrote a really short book and said, this is what they say about you behind the closed door. This is why you're not getting promoted. Here's how you can reshape the narrative around your life in the office and protect your peace. Super quick, to the point.
I love it. I love it. The same way you've been drilling this interview and this chat. And so, okay, book, physical reading. What about anything else that you're either buying or consuming? Because ironically, book is both media and product. Just anything else, any other observation of your behavior?
The second thing I'm committed to is closing my Apple rings. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm maniacal about it. Like, that is how I know it's a good day. For like the last 200 days, I have closed my Apple rings, which means I get up and move my behind every day, Gary, and I am rabidly, insanely committed to it.
I love it. Katrina, you are a delight. That is all I got.
Thank you. It's been fun. It's been fun.
please, please connect with Andre. I'd love to throw my biggest asset, which is time, against what you're up to, and would love to help if I can. And if you see an opportunity for me to bring you value and the organization, I am raising my hand.
Yes, yes, yes. I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Andre.
Katrina. Next up, we've got Ryan Holiday. Ryan is a New York Times best-selling author, an amazing speaker, and a former marketing executive at American Apparel. At the core of Ryan's teaching is Stoicism, a philosophy he has taken from ancient Rome and brought into the workplace, politics, and sports. His work has directly influenced Super Bowl winning teams like...
No, don't
Should
even
I say it?
No, because
New
we will,
England Patriots.
no, you were
And
not
Olympic gold medalists, as well as sitting senators, military leaders, and some of the biggest companies. Oh, good. All right, I got through it. We are so excited to hear from you, Ryan. Welcome.
Hey, Gary. Hey, everyone.
Hi, Ryan.
How are you?
I'm in a bad mood now that Andre said that. That is like that word, in a world where a lot of words should not be said. I'm trying to figure out how to make that word, that team she mentioned, something that is no longer politically correct to verbalize. So Ryan, it's great to see you. For full disclosure to everybody, because I want to flatter you, when we decided to start Vayner Speakers 18 months ago or what have you, Zach Nadler came over from CAA where I was repped, and we started Vayner Speakers together, and you were at the tippy top of my list, the serendipity of us being in LA at the same time we sat down, and I'm just really happy to see you. I'm a big fan, and I hope you're doing well. It's good to see you, brother.
No, I'm doing great. And look, I think, the Vayner speaker thing has been sort of a great example of what we're going to talk about. You'd think that a speaking agency would be decimated by a pandemic, which cancels all live events. But I've been just as busy as ever because you guys have adapted and changed, and that's life, right? Shit happens, and you got to figure out how to keep going.
100%. Tell us about your story, right? Give some context to the audience.
Yeah, I dropped out of college when I was 19. I worked for this writer named Robert Greene, who wrote the 48 Laws of Power, and I ended up through sort of a connection with a kind of an unnamed assistant job at a company called American Apparel, and I worked my way up very quickly. Ended up running marketing there. I was running running the marketing department at a publicly traded company in my early 20s. And I watched that company succeed in a lot of ways at marketing, and I watched it destroy itself in a lot of other ways, both from an operations standpoint and from a controversy standpoint. And as fascinated as I was by marketing, as much as I loved it, I think we share an assumption, which is the ultimate goal of marketing should be to market your own stuff. If you are really good at this, what are you doing selling your services exclusively to other brands? And so for me, the transition eventually was to writing my own books and then starting my own companies, starting my own brands, taking advisor roles in companies in exchange for marketing advice. And I sort of built a portfolio and a business and a life where I do much less sort of contract marketing and much more, stuff where I'm an owner.
Yeah, owned and operated more than renting.
Totally.
You talk a lot about leadership. I think you have a very strong foundation in its understanding. That's why you've been successful with your books and your speaking. What's been your observation about leadership during this pandemic? Have people been exposed, both pro and con? Have you seen some anecdotal, similarities of things that work or don't work?
Yeah, look, and I think we can talk about this from a sort of a post-political standpoint. Like, it doesn't have to be partisan to say there have been very, very few leaders who have done well in this pandemic. I think the NBA has done a fantastic job, and I would say almost every local government and national government has done a poor job, right? And so what has sort of separated the two? I think it's been clear communication. I think one of the things when you look at the NBA's response, and I'm just picking that because it's not as controversial as some of the other stuff. I think one of the things that's defined Adam Silver's response has been a clear vision for what he wants to do. It was an ambitious vision. Some might have said a crazy vision, but he figured out what he wanted to do. He communicated about it. He got everyone on board, and then he executed it consistently, ethically, and intelligently. And so there's a great saying that the Stoics love that I talk about in my books, and I've been thinking about a lot during this pandemic. Basically, the expression is character is fate, right? So we don't control what happens to us. Nobody knows who's going to get lucky, who's going to get unlucky. But the one thing that determines, how successful a person is going to be ultimately is their character. And I would put competence as a sort of a sub-bullet under character. So if you know what you're doing, if you're a good person, if you're consistent, if you're honest, if you're straightforward, eventually you're going to find a way to succeed. Conversely, if you're dishonest, if you can't deal with challenging viewpoints, you put your fingers in your ear when you hear things you don't like, if you don't care about other people, so on and so forth, you are going to crash and burn, whether it's quickly or eventually.
Talk to me about your advice for people that are kind of in between what you just said. Let's say somebody's watching right now and they're kind of like, okay, that was a good answer. Oh, I'm a buyer of everything that you just said. Sally, Rick, feel like I've got a foot in each side. Anything practical, that anything stand out when I say that? Because I've been getting more of that lately, which is like, Gary, what if I'm in between? What if I'm in between? What if I'm in between? So I'm just curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is values, right? It's the tension between values and profit and success, right? And so I think a lot of times people go, yeah, sure, I want to be good. I want to do the right thing. I want to be one of those people I admire, but I have payroll to meet, but I have this, constraint in this way. And so what I think this pandemic is a good time to stop and think about is like, what is it actually that you stand for? What is it that is most important to you? And you can write that down. You can take, Marcus Aurelius called these epithets for the self. So what are the words is it 5 words or 10 words? Like, what are the commandments that you and your business operate by? And you have to stick with those rules, whether it's a great market or a bad market, whether the world is melting down or whether everything, you've got a massive tailwind at your back. And so I think when you look at great leaders, ultimately what they are putting first is those values. You see that in sports teams more than anything, right? And there's a reason those sports teams, you walk into any, collegiate program, any professional sports team, you're going to see those organizational values printed up and put on the wall. And I think a lot of organizations, a lot of people think that that's cheesy or kind of lame. They're like, I don't want these motivational posters on the wall. But if you don't know what you stand for, and if you're not constantly reiterating it, it's really hard to make those painful decisions under pressure.
What about the thing that I've come to realize, like, I was doing this subconsciously, but I'm starting to now communicate it because it became consciously. Everything you just said, being held up with consequences. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, that I've always lived, but have come to realize, I don't talk a lot about, which is why I'm getting these questions, is you've got the posters on the wall. You're a good communicator. You've actually communicated extremely well. You're a good marketer, but operationally as a leader, you're not creating consequences when somebody breaks that rule. Like, to me, the quickest way for a sports organization or a business to fold is through the lack of execution on holding up what you stand for, and you're turning a blind eye to somebody that's either producing, or in sports terms, the thing that's devastating in sports is guaranteed contracts. I've seen a lot of coaches inevitably have to get fired because their GM paid a huge amount of money for some player who's not delivering, and they don't have the political, they're in this pickle where they want to bench the player to create consequences.
Sure.
But they can't. Similarly, somebody's watching right now, they're in upper middle management or upper management. They want to fire Gary or Ryan, but they can't because Andrea, the boss, likes Gary or Ryan. And now all of a sudden everybody else is watching that Gary and Ryan don't live that life. Because there is no consequences, the whole thing falls down.
No, look, I think that's true as a parent as well. Like, you can say what you think, but you got to be about it. And the Stoics said this. They said, look, don't talk about your philosophy. You got to embody it. And I think you have to do it in the painful moments most of all. And you have to see that as sort of making a down payment on those values. You're not doing it just to convince everyone at the company right now, but also to convince all future employees, right? You know, I think Uber struggled with this, right? It's not just a sports thing, but Uber struggled with recruiting a bunch of sort of rock star, but wasn't culture, right? And it created a culture that ended up getting itself in trouble. And I think that's a pretty common thing. You have to figure out not just what you stand for, but how do you demonstrate and exempt yourself from those rules most of all.
Hey, Rye, you chopped there for a little bit. Andre, did he chop for you as well, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Now we can perfectly. Can you 4/100th of a second recap of what you just said for the last 30 seconds?
Sure. It's not just about what you stand for, but how do you demonstrate that you do it when it counts, and that nobody, least of all you, is exempt from those rules.
Applying influence on brands, something you talk about, something in your ethos. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, look, my books wouldn't be successful without influencers, right? Nobody looks to the New York Times to find out what book is getting reviewed. They look to Instagram and they see what are people that I admire happening to read. And what I think has been interesting about Instagram, let's say in the book space, is like what I think about influencers. I want to be the product that person is not typically recommending. So, you know, look, people who go to the New York Times book review to find out about books, that's all books, right? And you don't stand out being reviewed there. But you know, an Instagram model who has 2.5 million followers, who suddenly recommends a book about philosophy that she's reading, that stands out. It's different. It's not what her fans are expecting. And so when I think about influence, I want to go where it's not crowded, and I want to go where people have an authentic relationship with those fans. So I think, you know, I read a study that someone was saying, oh, you know, this pandemic, the economic crisis is gonna, you know, be very detrimental to the influencer space. I think it's having
no
the
way.
exact opposite.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm shocked that was their take.
Yeah, because look, the one thing we are doing is using our phones more because we're less busy. We're not driving down highways and looking at billboards. We're not watching television commercials. We're not looking at the TV in the airport. We're looking at our phones.
People are like, this is a fad. I'm like, John Wayne sold cigarettes. I'm like, I don't understand how you don't understand that this is, and that, by the way, that's a modern history example. We can go back, you know,
sure.
I mean, forever. Brian, what's, you know, you're such a thinker. I'm now being selfish the last 3 minutes. Any early, this is not a well, you don't have every T and I crossed. Any seed of an early hypothesis of something that you're observing is fascinating to you?
Well, you'd like this one. I was talking to an SEC basketball coach the other day, and what I was talking to him about, you know, these coaches work insane lifestyles. They work like you. They're at the office constantly. They love the grind. They don't do it because they have to. They do it because they love it. But he's like, I didn't know I could be home this much and do my job. And so I think it's going to transform people's relationship with their job because it's been a radical lifestyle experiment, and it's allowed us to test assumptions that under ordinary circumstances you'd never be allowed to touch. Yeah, 100%. And so 100%. I don't know about you, and obviously this is a very privileged thing to say, but I feel like when we do come out of this, and I don't think we'll ever go back to normal, but as life does resume some of the old things, for me and my family, it's going to be, how do we preserve some of this space that we've created? How do we keep some of these lifestyle experiments not going back to normal?
Little things. I was saying to somebody the other day, I'm so excited. The number one anxious moment in my life is when my kids have a school function or a basketball game or a recital or tennis or something in the middle of the day that I'm going to. And I am, of course, maximizing, because of my love for what I do, maximizing every minute. So I'm leaving my office in Midtown. I'm literally texting my driver, Uber, like, okay, 31 minutes, perfect. I'll get there right on time. And then I'm trying to run out the office and Amy has to grab me like, hey, Andrea needs you for about, like, in that 2 minutes, all of a sudden anxiousness kicks in. Now I'm in the car. It's fucking Midtown Manhattan. All of a sudden, all you need is one fire truck, and 13 to 22 times a year, I have this anxiety and concern. Now I'm going to leave an hour and a half early. I'm going to get to the closest coffee shop, to the school that they're playing, whatever. I'm going to Zoom my meeting. And it's such a little thing, but I'm like, wow, I'm going to completely play this differently. You and I share some similarities in our careers and lives. I've been to the most incredible places in the world, yet Istanbul or Kuwait City or Madrid could have been Newark, New Jersey. I fly in, I go to the hotel, right. I sleep, I speak, I go back to the airport because I'm maximizing. Sure. Because whether it's family or business, but if it's business that I'm maximizing for, all of a sudden, that 1 p.m. meeting with the big CEO or my team can now be Zoom, right? And all of a sudden, I do have the chance to at least have a meal or see one thing in these places. So I think there's some significant differences. The biggest one is a leader that I'm excited to impose on, just to maybe put this out there, maybe it'll help some other leaders. I have so many young employees. They have unlimited weddings and all sorts of cool shit that happens in your 20s and 30s. I think about my employees that have a wedding. They're ambitious workers. It's the subculture of our society of like what you do in an office. And they're leaving for these weddings, Friday midday, fucking also panicking to get to LGA just to land in Austin in time for the rehearsal dinner, right? Right. Are tired, Saturday morning, then Sunday, they're anxious at the breakfast because they have to catch the 2 p.m. flight. Why? Because they have to be in the office on Monday. That same person now gets to leave on Wednesday, get settled in with their boyfriend or girlfriend Thursday, maybe even enjoy Austin a little bit. Friday, work again on computer, nicely enjoy their rehearsal dinner, beautifully enjoy the wedding, love to have the breakfast. All of a sudden, Sunday afternoon is to catch up with their other friend from college. They get to leave, they get to maybe even do a meeting at 9 a.m. from Austin with the team on computer, then go to the airport. Like the quality of life for the executive, for the employee, all of a sudden what used to be a Friday afternoon till Sunday mid-morning, like very kind of heavy, intense, not relaxing moment becomes a Wednesday evening to Monday night travel schedule. I think that's going to bring enormous happiness to humans.
Yeah, or maybe just buy their first house in a small town a couple hours outside New York City because their commute and their lifestyle is more flexible and they don't have to be in Manhattan full time.
Now you're me and AJ will always regret a thesis we had, which was self-driving cars and technology were going to advance, and that the hour and a half outside of Manhattan was going to become the incredible real estate arbitrage. And that is absolutely now cat out of the bag and happening by the second. So yes, Ryan, I know you're a very, very smart man, and that is a very big time observation. I appreciate you. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, man. Appreciate everything.
Talk soon. We have an incredible guest to wrap this up. For anybody who's just joining, or if you liked anything that you just saw or some of the comments I know you're going to enjoy in our next session, it's #marketingforthenow. Thanks for joining us. Andrea, please introduce our final and incredible guest.
So last but certainly not least, we have Elena Cheng, the CEO of Guardian Direct and head of direct to consumer at Guardian Life. Elena has over 15 years of experience working with CEOs and executive management teams in the financial services industry. She's the boss. Throughout her career, she's improved client satisfaction and established alternative distribution channels to penetrate target markets. Thank you for joining us, Elena. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. That was an incredible conversation. I was literally like trying to unmute myself and chime in with Gary and Ryan right there.
I love that. Elena, it's great to see you. How have you been?
Great. How about you? Looking well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You too. Talk to me about the insurance industry as a whole. What's the 411? I'm a little bit undereducated. I'm sure many are as well. What's the most interesting things that have happened during this pandemic? Increases, pivots? What's the punchline?
Yeah, it's hard to not talk about digital and insurance. I mean, I think people think of insurance as these really old line companies that are heavily, face to face. And certainly, what's happening in the world today, Ryan was just talking about how we're doing everything on the phone. And that's the pivot we're seeing from our customers. They are craving and demanding digital interaction because of the way we live our lives today. And so, you know, for us at Guardian Direct, it's been such an interesting time. So for us, it's I would say less of a pivot and more of an acceleration of what we've been doing in terms of investing heavily in digital to consumer capabilities. So it's all paying off at this moment because we can really be there for our customers. So for us, it's about like, how do we go harder? How do we go faster to meet the needs of our customers? And they're showing up, which is really exciting.
What is Guardian Direct, just for everybody, you know, just even taking a step back, just to educate the audience?
Yeah, Guardian Direct is, I would say, you know, the digital manifestation of a 160-year-old company called Guardian Life, insurance for the people. And so what we are is we're bringing a kind of modern digital capabilities around buying insurance to our consumers. Today, we sell multiple products: dental, vision, accident, critical illness, and pet insurance. So think about us in terms of protecting your health and protecting, you know, things that are important in your lives.
Love that. What about you as a professional? Like, just I'm enjoying a little bit of the origin stories that we're creating here. What kind of kid were you? Like, studious, entrepreneurial, and what really like triggered off your career? How did it go about?
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly enough, I think I was both. But growing up, you know, probably much more studious because you know you're raised in an immigrant family that, you know, moved their whole family over here. You know, so you can have a better life, you better get good grades. And I remember, you know, thinking when I saw the rise of Paris Hilton that could have been me, because in fourth grade, I was charging people to line up to be my friend, and people were actually paying me, you know, 50 cents, $1. And I said, wow, my life could have gone in such a different direction. But no, my mom found out, made me give all the money back, and of course, you know, kept me on a good path in terms of education. So, you know, I would say I was the kid that did all the right things, made all the right decisions. But I think that entrepreneurial kind of upstart was always in there. And now I think, you know, as an adult, I get to marry, you know, kind of both those passions together. And it's a lot of fun.
Talk to me about leading from home.
Yeah.
You
tough,
know,
right?
yeah, I mean, you know, for some people, very, very tough. For some people, remarkably easy. And then everything in between. What stands out for you in how you've been leading, how you've seen others lead? What's your observations?
I think, you know, the leadership piece is the same to me. It's just working harder to do it in a different way. Usually, you know, we're in the office together. I can see people, I can reach out to them. I can see their mood. I can really feel it in the office. I can stop by, give them a pat on the shoulder. And now we're in this very virtual world. So you need to be much, much more purposeful in your interactions. And I think much more empathetic. Like, we're all dealing with, you know, the benefits of maybe being at home with our families and what's going on in our lives. But we're also dealing with being at home with our families and what's going on in our lives. So, you know, there's no such thing as perfection in that controlled environment. People have kids that are like barging into meetings and trying to get tech support. That's happened to me multiple times. Like, my iPad's not working, my Zoom, it crashed, you know, and I need to get back onto that class. We've got barking dogs. We've got, you know, fresh direct deliveries, you know, where you got to open the door. It's all happening, and people need to help their friends and their families and take time off. And I think, you know, just really understanding that the whole person has to come to work. And so creating that space a lot, that's why
do you think that's created much deeper connections? Because now all of a sudden, you know, Karen's got a cute dog, or you didn't know that Rick collected mugs and has 1,000 of them in the back. Like, do you think in a lot of ways, allowing people into their homes has created, I've heard some incredible anecdotal stories and actual stories of, like, you know, one employee said to me, Gary, you always talk about empathy. You know, my boss is a jerk, but, you know, honestly, I have a lot more compassion for him now that I've gotten a much deeper look under the hood of some of the challenges he's facing.
I totally agree with that. You know, I think you know, with us in particular, sometimes in corporate America, you don't realize how detached you become because you don't want to, you know, kind of get into people's lives too much. And I think this has sort of opened the door for so much of that. I know more about my team members than I ever have. And I do think that the support that we're giving each other during this tough time has brought us closer, has made us want to work harder together. And I think it's showing in the results. So in some ways, kind of a twisted environment, but has been really good for us.
I like that. So, you know, what I don't think a lot of people understand is you're one of the biggest DTC brands in the world. You know, people think of it, you know, more in makeup or food and things of that nature. What about platforms integration? Like, how do you think about standing something like that up?
Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, we're looking down that barrel every day. I mean, in terms of platforms, you know, you need, as you know, to stand up a venture like this, some hardcore engineering, because the insurance products can be complicated. So it's not just front end, but it's being able to seamlessly deliver direct, instant product. And, you know, the industry has struggled with that. And I'm really proud to say that, you know, if you're a Guardian Direct customer and you come online, you're buying that product and you're walking away with it in that moment. And that's a big, big shift for most of the players in our industry. And it's really exciting to be able to bring that to consumers. In terms of how we talk to our customers, also totally different. You know, we're a fully digital model, which means we don't have salespeople, we don't have brokers. We are out there, you know, on Google, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, you know, working to reach the customer and help educate them and help them, you know, understand like what they need to do to protect themselves and their health. So it's a really exciting time. You know, what we've seen lots of different shifts in terms of the platform. What we're really seeing is that one platform strategy is I think pretty much done. We're seeing customers, you know, taking more time on their journey to make decisions. And so we're needing to connect with them on multiple levels, on multiple platforms to get them comfortable, to help them understand the value before they make a decision.
What about you, the human? What's the biggest consumer shift that you've gone through during COVID over the last 100+ days, from media consumption to purchase behavior? What have you bought online that you've never bought before, and now you're like, oh, I'm not going to Dwayne Reed anymore. I'm buying shampoo like this, or anything.
Yeah, what haven't I bought online? So basically, you know, I'm locked down with my parents who are older and in a risk category. So essentially, we do nothing outside that we don't have to. So literally, I have bought everything I possibly could online. And I think you're seeing that across the industry, right, Gary? I mean, you're seeing digital, you know, adoption acceleration anywhere from 20 to 50% in different industries. And certainly insurance is not, you know, not special to that. People are buying everything online. They're wanting to do everything online. In fact, I think some of the things that they're not doing online, they just can't. And so it's really up to us to really take that next step and bring it all there.
Anything really funny for you? Like any fun favorite new product you discovered?
Oh God, you know, it's funny because when you're in lockdown, you buy all sorts of things that you never do. So I have to say, like, I have more beauty products than I have ever purchased in my life. Most people who know me, really simple girl. You know, it's like moisturizer and sunscreen. That's it. I have literally, you know, I went out and bought a hair curler, which I never used. I mean, this is, you know, I'm really sharing now.
Yeah, that's sharing.
Yeah, exactly.
We're trying to double click. We're trying to go deep here.
But it's, but I think that's, people are online literally 24/7. And they're on their phones. Totally agree with Ryan. It's fully mobile now. We're seeing this huge shift in our traffic. It's fully mobile. And so, you know, people are just seeing things and impulse buying. And so being out there when they're thinking at night or in the morning, it's so important. And there's an openness, I think, to consumption that's so different now.
And what about media consumption? Any new shows? Any new platforms? Did you download a new OTT? Are you consuming more podcasts?
I have literally watched everything on Netflix.
Like all of it.
Probably. You know, that's my.
Have you seen this? I saw yesterday. I watched for a few minutes. I'm going to really get into it. This whole like The Mob versus New York, kind of like talking about the late 70s. Oh,
I need to go. I literally have binge watched. There's this Indian matchmaking show. I binge watched that.
Yes, I saw that come across.
So,
I didn't watch it, but it looks
so fun. I don't know. I'm on the like happiness theme because there's a lot of kind of depressing news out there right now. So I've been watching kind of pick me ups, and I've been watching the new season of Queer Eye. So it's lots of fun shows. Trying to lighten the mood a bit.
Well, listen, you were fun and informative. I appreciate you. Continued success. Thanks for closing off this great show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, talk to you
Good
soon.
to see you. Bye.
Andre, take us home.
Thank you, Elena, and thanks to all of our speakers today. Check out VaynerX.com for all of our recordings and keep the conversation going, #marketingforthenow. And join us next week, Thursday, August 6th from 12:30 to 2, where we're gonna have the who's who focusing on e-commerce. Can't wait to see you.
Bye, everyone.